My name is Marcus. I'm 32 years old. And before all this happened, I was just another guy trying to get by. I lived on the outskirts of Redding, California, in a community too small to show up on maps, but big enough for everyone to know everyone else's name. I worked as a delivery driver for an agricultural supply distributor, fertilizers, pesticides, hybrid seeds. I spent my days driving down dusty roads, visiting the farms and greenhouses that dotted the dry Northern California landscape. It wasn't the kind of life anyone planned for. It was the kind of life that happens when you drop out of high school your sophomore year because your mom is sick and the bills don't pay themselves. Since I was 16, I'd taken whatever work I could find. Loading feed bags in suffocating warehouses, mucking out stables that smelled of ammonia and rot, delivering propane tanks to trailers scattered across the hills. I didn't mind hard work. In fact, I preferred it. The more tired I got, the less time I had to think. My boss at the distributor was a guy named Bill Hendricks, owner of 3 beat-up pickup trucks and a reputation for honesty that was worth more than money in that county. He trusted me because I was never late, never asked for a salary advance, and never caused drama. I was invisible in the right way. He gave me the longest routes, the ones that snaked through the sun-bleached hills where the only company was the drone of the tires on cracked asphalt and the occasional skeleton of a dead cow on the shoulder. I drove the same decrepit Ford pickup for 3 years. No air conditioning, no working radio, just the sound of the engine sputtering and the hot wind rushing through the open windows. I liked that silence. It was honest, promised nothing more than what it was. Then, one day in March of 2019, everything changed because of one stupid accident. I was making a delivery to an almond farm when the clutch completely gave out. The truck stood still in the middle of a dirt road, smoking like a wounded animal. Bill picked me up a few hours later, but when I came back to the distributor the next morning, he called me into the office. There were papers spread across the desk, overdue bills, envelopes from the bank. "Marcus," he said, not meeting my eyes, "I have to cut staff. You're a good worker, but I can't afford 3 drivers when I only have 2 working trucks." He handed me a severance check that barely covered 1 month's rent. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, gathered my things, and left. I wasn't mad at him. That was just how things worked. You break, you get replaced. For 2 weeks, I sat in my tiny apartment. A 1-bedroom, a kitchen that felt more like a closet, a bathroom where the shower dripped even when it was turned off. I sent resumes to everywhere I could think of. Grocery stores, gas stations, hardware stores. No one answered, or when they did, they said they had no openings at the moment. The anxiety started to settle in, that tight feeling in your stomach that doesn't go away even when you eat. That's when I ran into Martha in the grocery store parking lot. She was a Mexican woman in her 60s who always shopped at the same time as me, Tuesdays and Thursdays, right after 4 in the afternoon. We'd nod hellos, nothing more. But that day, she noticed the half-empty bags in my hand, the way I counted coins before putting the items on the checkout belt. "Are you looking for work?" she asked in Spanish. Even though she knew I understood English, she had that heavy Sonora accent, the vowels drawn out and musical. I told her yes. "My brother has a wholesale clothing store in San Luis Obispo. He needs someone to help with stocking and loading. Pays cash every week. If you want, I can talk to him." San Luis Obispo was almost a 4-hour drive away, on the other side of the state. But I had nothing keeping me in Redding. No girlfriend, no close friends, no family except for a grandmother who lived on a Modoc reservation that I only saw at Christmas. 2 weeks later, I was driving my '95 Civic down Highway 101. Everything I owned piled up in the back seat. The store was in an industrial complex on the outskirts of San Luis Obispo, sharing space with an auto parts warehouse and a commercial cleaning company. The building was a gray, featureless rectangle with tall windows covered in mirrored film. Inside, it was surprisingly organized. Rows of racks with clothes still sealed in plastic, metal shelves packed with boxes, a small glass-walled office in the back. Martha's brother was named Roberto. He was a short, robust man with a thick mustache and large hands from a lifetime of heavy lifting. He greeted me with a firm handshake and showed me where everything was. The unloading area in the back, the barcode system they used to track inventory, the tiny bathroom that eternally smelled of bleach and mildew. "You start Monday," he said. 8 o'clock sharp. Don't be late." I wasn't late. For the first few weeks, I worked silently, doing exactly what I was asked. I unloaded trucks, organized boxes by brand and size, and swept the warehouse when the shift ended. The work was physically less demanding than lugging 50-pound bags of fertilizer in the 100-degree heat, but it had its own kind of monotony, a repetition that made the days bleed into one another until you didn't know if it was Tuesday or Thursday. That's where I met Raul. He was the sales manager, the kind of guy who looked like he was born selling. 30-something, hair always slicked back with gel, ironed button-down shirts, teeth too white to be natural. From day one, he approached me with that artificial enthusiasm salesmen tend to have. Big smiles, pats on the back, jokes that no one found funny except him. "Marcus, my man," he'd say every morning, as if we were old buddies. "You're built like a tank, man. I bet you played football in high school, didn't you?" I never played football. I barely attended school long enough to be on any team. But Raul didn't wait for honest answers. He just wanted to fill the silence with noise, so I let him. As time went on, I started noticing things about him. The way he changed depending on who was around. With Roberto, he was deferential, almost subservient, laughing loudly at unfunny jokes, agreeing with everything. With the other employees, he was condescending, speaking slowly as if explaining things to children. And with me, he was falsely buddy-buddy, the kind of friendship that felt like a thin layer of paint over rusted metal. He noticed everything. If you were 5 minutes late, he noted it. If you took too long in the bathroom, he commented. If you ate your lunch too fast or too slow, he had something to say. But always with that smile, always masked as a joke or a concern. I kept my distance from him as much as possible. I did my work, ate my sandwich in my car, and went back to the apartment I'd rented. A studio above a laundromat that vibrated every Tuesday and Thursday with the rhythm of industrial machines. At night, I'd lie on the narrow bed and listen to the constant hum from downstairs, a sound that eventually became comforting. It was predictable, reliable. 3 months after I started, Roberto called me into the office. I thought I'd done something wrong, that he'd caught me taking 10-minute naps in the car during lunch, or that I'd broken some unwritten rule about how to organize the boxes. But when I walked in, he was smiling. "Marcus, you're punctual. You don't make trouble. You don't ask me stupid questions every 5 minutes." He opened a drawer and pulled out a keyring. "I'm promoting you. You're going to handle the full inventory now. That means you'll have access to the warehouse, you'll review orders before they go out, you'll coordinate with suppliers." He slid the keys across the desk. They were heavy, with a metal keyring that had the store's logo engraved on it. "Don't disappoint me," he said. But the way he said it felt more like a vote of confidence than a threat. That night, I held the keys in my apartment and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. It was a small, even stupid thing, a metal keyring for a clothing warehouse, but it meant someone trusted me, that I was more than just a pair of arms to carry boxes. 2 days later, Raul approached me during break. He was smiling that way that made me want to back away, but I was trapped between a shelf and a stack of boxes. "Congrats on the promotion, man," he said, holding out his hand. I shook it briefly. His fingers were clammy. "Look, I know we're not close or anything, but I respect what you do here. Hard worker doesn't mess around." "That's rare, dude." I nodded, waiting for him to get to the point. "So, my wife, she started working here last week. Customer service department. I know you probably haven't even noticed her yet, but she's kind of nervous, you know? New job, wants to make a good impression. I told her you're a good guy, that if she needs help with anything, she can ask you." Before I could reply, a female voice cut the air. "Raul, stop suffocating the poor guy." I turned and saw her for the first time. Brenda. She was tall, taller than I expected, with long legs emphasized by pants too tight to be appropriate for a warehouse. Dark hair cascaded over her shoulders in artificial waves. Heavy makeup that made her eyes look bigger and brighter than they should have been. She wore a tight red top that left nothing to the imagination and smiled with a confidence that felt utterly out of place for someone who was just starting out. "Hi, I'm Brenda," she said. extending a hand with long, red nails. "Sorry about my husband. He thinks he needs to do PR for me, but I handle myself just fine." I shook her hand briefly. Her skin was warm, almost feverish, and she held my hand a second longer than necessary. In the following weeks, Brenda became a constant presence. She'd show up in the warehouse with excuses to be there, looking for a specific box, checking an order, asking where something was that she surely already knew. Whenever I was working, she found a reason to linger. At first, I thought she was just being friendly. Maybe she was bored in customer service and looking for conversation. But there was something about the way she looked at me that made me uncomfortable, a kind of attention that was too intense, too focused. Her eyes followed me when I moved, and when I caught her looking, she didn't look away. She just smiled. She talked loudly, always laughing at things that weren't funny, telling stories that had no end, inserting herself into conversations that didn't include her. Some of the other employees found her entertaining, charismatic. I found her exhausting. She touched a lot. My arm when she walked past me, my shoulder when she asked a question, my hand when I handed something to her. Always casual, always quick enough not to be overtly inappropriate, but constant enough not to be accidental. One day, as I was rearranging a high shelf, she appeared behind me so silently that she startled me. "You're quiet," she said, tilting her head. "I like that. Most guys won't stop talking about themselves. You're different." "I'm just trying to work," I replied without looking at her. "I know. It's sexy." I froze. I waited for her to laugh, to say she was joking. But when I turned around, her face was completely serious. She looked at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out, her heels echoing on the concrete floor. On Friday of that week, Raul approached me again. "Dude, Brenda and I want to have you over for dinner. Like, a thank you for being nice to her. She said you were the only one who really helped her settle in." I hadn't helped Brenda with anything besides doing my job and trying to avoid her, but refusing felt rude. Plus, Raul was technically my supervisor. Saying no didn't feel like an option. "Sure," I said. "When? Tomorrow night? Like 7 o'clock. He gave me the address, an apartment complex across town, near the highway. On Saturday, I spent the day with a knot in my stomach. I considered making an excuse, pretending I was sick. But eventually, I forced myself to shower, put on clean clothes, and drive over there. Their apartment was on the second floor of a beige building that looked like all the others in the complex. Raul opened the door wearing basketball shorts and a beer-stained t-shirt. "Marcus, come in, man." The interior was small but clean. A sectional couch dominating the living room, a big TV on the wall, the smell of seasoned food coming from the kitchen. Brenda was there, wearing a short dress that definitely wasn't casual dinner-at-home attire. She smiled when she saw me. "Marcus, I'm so glad you came." She walked up and hugged me. A full embrace, her body pressing against mine, her arms around my neck. I stood stiffly, not knowing where to put my hands. "Sit, sit," Raul said, shoving a cold beer into my hand. "We made beef stew. Hope you like it." The food was good, tender meat in a rich, dark sauce, rice, refried beans, warm tortillas. We ate at the small kitchen table, Raul dominating the conversation with stories about his days selling used cars before working at the store. Brenda was quiet, but I could feel her eyes on me, even when I wasn't looking. After dinner, some neighbors showed up, an older couple who lived downstairs. Raul lit a portable grill on the balcony and started cooking sausages. The beer kept flowing. The music got louder. By around midnight, Raul was completely drunk. He had that kind of drunkenness that makes people repeat the same stories 3 times, laughing each time as if it were the first. Eventually, he collapsed on the couch, eyes closed, mouth open. I was about to say goodnight and leave when Brenda sat next to me on the opposite sofa. Not beside me like someone sitting on the same piece of furniture. Next to me like someone leaving no space between our bodies. "He always gets like this," she said quietly, gesturing toward Raul. "Drinks too much, passes out, lets me do whatever I want." Her thigh was pressed against mine. I could feel her heat through the thin fabric of the dress. "I should go," I said, starting to get up. Her hand grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to make me pause. "Stay a little longer," she said. Her fingers traced circles on the inside of my wrist. "We barely talked. I want to get to know you better." "Brenda, I really need to. You're handsome, Marcus. You know that." Her other hand was on my knee now, slowly moving up my thigh. "I see the way you look at me at work. Don't pretend you don't notice." "I don't." My voice failed. My heart was pounding, but not in the way it does when you want something. It was the kind of heartbeat that comes from fear. She leaned in, her face inches from mine. I could smell her breath, sweet and alcoholic, on my face. "I want you, Marcus, and I always get what I want." I stood up so quickly I almost knocked over the coffee table. "This can't happen. Your husband is right there. I work with you guys. This is exciting." She tilted her head, smiling. There was no shame on her face, no guilt, just that fixed, artificial smile. "Wrong," I said. "This is wrong." I grabbed my keys and left without looking back. My hands were shaking so hard it took me 3 tries to unlock the car. The entire drive back, my brain was spinning. Should I tell Roberto? But tell him what exactly? That his sales manager's wife had hit on me? Who would believe me? And even if they did, I would be the troublemaker, the guy who caused drama. When I got home, I locked the door, double-checked that it was locked, and took the longest shower of my life, trying to wash away the feeling of her skin against mine. On Monday, when I went back to work, I acted like nothing had happened. Brenda did too. She greeted me with the same bright smile she always wore, asked about my weekend, commented on the weather. Raul asked if I'd enjoyed dinner, laughed about how much he'd drunk. It was as if that moment on the couch had never existed. But I knew it had, and by the gleam in her eyes when she looked at me, she knew that I knew, and she wasn't finished. The days that followed that dinner seemed normal on the surface, but there was an undercurrent of tension that kept me constantly on edge. Brenda didn't mention what had happened, or almost happened, that night, but her presence became inescapable in a new, suffocating way. She showed up in the warehouse with a frequency that made no sense for someone in customer service. She always had an excuse, checking a number, looking for a specific style, asking about a delayed order, but the excuses were weak, transparent. And she didn't try to hide them. It was as if she wanted me to know she was purposely seeking me out. I started changing my routine. If I normally did inventory in the morning, I switched to the afternoon. If I usually ate lunch at 12, I waited until 1:30. But she adapted. It was as if she had an internal radar tuned into my movements. One Tuesday, I was in the back of the warehouse, cataloging a shipment of leather jackets that had arrived the night before. The area was isolated, separated from the rest of the warehouse by tall shelving. I could hear the distant murmur of the other employees' conversations, the occasional beep of the barcode scanner, the squeak of hand carts being pushed, and then her perfume. Even before looking, I knew she was there. She wore some heavy, sweet fragrance that lingered in the air long after she left. Jasmine mixed with something darker, muskier. "You're avoiding me," she said. It wasn't a question. I kept my eyes on the clipboard, pretending to be absorbed in the count. "I'm working." "No, you're hiding. From me." She walked closer, her heels tapping a rhythm on the concrete. "Why? I'm not hiding anything. I have a lot of work." "Marcus." Her voice had changed, softer, almost vulnerable. "Look at me." Reluctantly, I lifted my eyes. She was less than a meter away, her arms crossed under her chest in a way that emphasized her cleavage. But it was her face that made me pause. The edges of the fixed smile had cracked, revealing something that looked genuine underneath. Sadness? Frustration? Couldn't place it. "I know what happened on Saturday was intense," she said. "And I respect that you left. It shows you have principles. But Marcus, you felt it, didn't you? That connection between us." "There's no connection whatsoever," I said, stronger than I intended. "You're married to my supervisor." This can't happen. Married. She let out a bitter laugh. You saw what Raul is like. He barely looks at me. We share an apartment, not a life. I've been alone in this marriage for years. That's not my problem, isn't it? She took another step forward. Now I could see the small imperfections in her makeup. The foundation a little too thick, trying to cover dark patches under her eyes. The eyeliner slightly smudged on the left corner. Because it seems like you're making it your problem. If you really didn't care, you wouldn't be trying so desperately to avoid me. She was right, and I hated it. I was thinking about her. Not in the way she wanted, but constantly. Every time I turned a corner at work, my body tensed, preparing to run into her. Every time my phone rang, I checked to make sure it wasn't her. She had infiltrated my consciousness like smoke seeping under a door. I just want to do my job and be left alone, I said. Okay. She held up her hands in false surrender. I get it. You want space. I can give you space. She turned to leave, then stopped, looking over her shoulder. But Marcus, this feeling you have right now, this tension, this constant awareness of me, it's not going away. The more you fight it, the stronger it gets. She walked out before I could reply, leaving behind only that lingering perfume and a sense of unease that settled in my stomach like something I'd eaten and couldn't digest. She kept her word about giving me space in a way. She stopped showing up in the warehouse every 5 minutes. But her absence didn't bring relief. Instead, it made every casual encounter more loaded. When we passed each other in the hallway, she didn't speak, just looked at me with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. When we were in the same room during team meetings, I could feel her attention on me like a spotlight, even when she was talking to someone else. And then small, strange things started to happen. First was my paycheck. When I opened the envelope on Friday, the amount was $200 less than it should have been. I went to Roberto, who frowned and checked the paperwork. It says here you had inventory adjustments, he said, pointing to a line on the statement. Discrepancies between physical counts and system records. What discrepancies? I do the count myself. Everything is matching. He shrugged. Maybe you missed something. I'm sure it'll sort itself out next week. But it didn't sort itself out. The next week, $150 were missing. And the week after, $250. Each time, the explanation was vague. Administrative adjustments, payroll corrections, overtime recalculations. Roberto seemed genuinely confused, but also did nothing to correct it. Then they changed my schedule. Suddenly, instead of working 8 to 5, I was scheduled 11 to 8. When I asked why, Raul said it was for better coverage during peak hours. But no one else changed schedules, I pointed out. It's temporary, he said, not looking at my eyes. Just a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks turned into a month. And then they took away my warehouse keys. Roberto called me into his office one Wednesday morning. His face was stiff, unexpressive. We need to do a rotation of responsibilities, he said. Raul is going to take over inventory. You'll go back to loading and unloading. Why? Did I do something wrong? No. It's just company policy. No one should have exclusive control of an area for too long. But I've only been in this position for 4 months. And now it's time to change. He held out his hand. The keys. I pulled the keyring out of my pocket. Those same keys that had made me feel proud, competent, trustworthy, and placed them in his palm. It felt like I was handing over more than just access to a warehouse. It felt like I was handing over my dignity. That night, I went home and felt the familiar oppression of defeat settling in. That feeling of always being 2 steps away from falling back to where I started. Unemployed, purposeless, invisible. I took a hot shower, trying to relax the muscles that felt permanently tense. But when I got out and looked in the mirror, I noticed something that made me freeze. A bruise, right side of my neck, just below the jawline. Dark purple in the center, fading to yellowish green at the edges. Large, the size of a thumbprint. I ran my fingers over it. It hurt when I pressed, but it was a deep, internal ache, not the kind that comes from hitting something. I tried to remember if I had hurt myself at work. I had been carrying heavy boxes that day, but nothing that would explain a bruise so specific, so precisely located. And I surely would have remembered the impact if it had been strong enough to leave a mark like that. But I couldn't remember anything. In the following days, more symptoms appeared. Headaches that pulsed behind my eyes like something alive trying to push its way out. An exhaustion so profound that I could sleep 12 hours and wake up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. Insomnia that kept me awake until 4 in the morning. My mind spinning with thoughts that led nowhere. And the dreams. God, the dreams. They started innocent enough. Vague flashbacks of conversations I couldn't recall having. Places that felt familiar but that I was sure I had never visited. But they quickly became more vivid, more disturbing. I dreamt I was in Brenda's apartment, but it wasn't the same apartment where I had dinner. It was bigger, dark, with hallways that stretched at impossible angles. She was always present, but always just out of sight. I'd see her dress disappearing around a corner, hear her laughter echoing from a room I couldn't find, smell her perfume thick in the air like smoke. In one recurring dream, I was lying on a bed I didn't recognize, paralyzed, unable to move anything except my eyes. Brenda was sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, just watching. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared with that fixed smile, and I could feel something being pulled out of me. Not my blood or my breath, but something more essential. My will, perhaps. My autonomy. I'd wake up from these dreams with my body drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I could see it pulsing through my t-shirt. And it always took several minutes to convince myself that I was in my own apartment, in my own bed, alone. Except I wasn't sure I was alone. There were moments, usually in the deep quiet of 3 in the morning, when I had the unshakable certainty that someone was there with me. Not a physical presence I could see, but something that occupied the same space as me. As if the air had thickened into a near-human form. I started keeping a light on all night. Felt childish, but it helped. A little. At work, things continued to deteriorate. Roberto assigned me to the most monotonous tasks. Cleaning the bathroom, sweeping the parking lot, organizing the trash area. Tasks that were normally given to temp staff, not someone who had been there for almost a year. When I tried to question it, he just said it was what needed to be done. And I was the one who was available. Raul avoided me completely now. He no longer made those false attempts at camaraderie. When he needed to tell me something, he did it through other employees or left notes. His discomfort was palpable. As if I had become something unpleasant he preferred not to look directly at. Brenda, on the other hand, was everywhere. Not physically, she had gone back to giving me wide berth in the workplace. But I saw her in peripheral moments, walking into a room just as I was leaving, passing Roberto's office window when I was inside, her car parked next to mine in the lot, even though I never saw her get in or out. And then something started happening with my phone. Contacts I'd had for years simply disappeared. Not deleted, just gone, as if they had never existed. Messages came in from unknown numbers. Long, incoherent texts filled with Spanish words I didn't know. Grainy photos that looked like they were taken from the inside of somewhere dark. I deleted them, blocked the numbers, but new ones kept coming. One night, I received a video message. The file was small, only 15 seconds. I hesitated for a long time before opening it, some primal instinct telling me to just delete it without watching. But I opened it. The footage was shaky, dark, lit only by flickering candles. The camera moved slowly through a room I vaguely recognized. Could it be Brenda's living room? But the furniture was all different, pushed up against the walls. In the center of the floor was a circle drawn with something white, salt, perhaps, or chalk. Inside the circle were objects I couldn't fully identify. Something that might be a piece of cloth, something that might be hair, and in the center, a photograph. The camera zoomed in. It was a picture of me, not one I remembered taking, but I recognized myself. I was sleeping, my head tilted at an odd angle, my mouth slightly open, as if someone had entered where I was and photographed me while I was unconscious. The video cut to black before I could fully process what I had seen. I tried to play it again, but the file had corrupted, or disappeared. When I checked my messages, there was no record that anything had ever come through. I convinced myself I had imagined it. that my exhausted mind was creating things, filling in gaps with paranoia. But my hand was shaking when I held the phone. And I knew, somewhere deep and primal, that what I had seen was real. The next morning, I went to work determined to confront Brenda. I didn't know exactly what I would say, but I needed to end it. I needed answers. But when I arrived, Roberto called me into his office before I even clocked in. "Marcus, sit down." His tone was different. Not angry exactly, but firm. "Final." I sat. He slid an envelope across the desk. "We're downsizing. Nothing personal, just the economy, you understand. Here's your compensation." I picked up the envelope. Felt very thin. "Wait, you're firing me?" "Letting you go. It's different." But the way he said it didn't feel different. "Why? What did I do?" "Nothing. It's not about performance. It's about numbers." He wasn't looking me in the eyes. His fingers drummed nervously on the desk. "Roberto, I need this job. I moved here specifically to..." "I know, and I'm sorry, but the decision has been made." "By who?" "By you." He didn't answer, but I saw his jaw clench. His gaze darted quickly to the office window, to where Brenda was standing in the main area, looking directly at us. When our eyes met through the glass, she smiled. Not that artificial, bright smile she normally wore. This was different. It was cold, victorious. I understood then. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't downsizing or economic issues. It was her. How much did she have to do to get this? I asked quietly, my voice calmer than I thought it would be. Roberto blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about." For a moment, I saw something cross his face. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. But he pushed it down, buried it under a mask of professional authority. "Take your things and go, Marcus. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be." I sat there for another moment, looking at this man who had given me a chance, who had trusted me, who was now discarding me like trash because... Why? What did Brenda have on him? What did she have on Raul? What did she have on all of them? I stood up slowly, picked up the envelope, and walked out without another word. As I passed through the main area, Brenda was exactly where I had seen her through the window. She didn't try to stop me, didn't say anything. Just watched with that cold smile as I collected my lunch from the shared refrigerator, my water bottle from my old workstation. As I walked past her on the way out, she leaned in and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You're still going to come back to me." It wasn't a hope. It was a certainty. I drove back to my apartment in a kind of daze, my mind simultaneously racing and completely blank. The envelope on the passenger seat contained a check for $520. Not even enough to cover next month's rent. When I got home and climbed the stairs, I noticed something strange. My door, which I had locked carefully that morning, double-checking as I always did, was ajar. Just a crack, maybe an inch, but enough to see the darkness inside. I stood in the hallway for a long time, my heart pounding in my chest. Should I call the police? But what if it was just the caretaker checking something? What if I was just getting paranoid? I pushed the door open slowly. Nothing seemed to have been taken. My old TV was still there, my laptop on the desk, my wallet where I had left it. But something was different. The air felt thicker, charged with something I couldn't name. And there was a scent, faint but unmistakable. That perfume, jasmine and musk. I checked every room, every closet, under the bed. Nothing. No one. But she had been here. I knew with every fiber of my being that Brenda had been in my apartment. I spent that night sitting on the couch with all the lights on and a kitchen knife in my lap, waiting for morning. The first thing I did the next morning was call the only relative I still talked to, my grandmother, Ellie. She lived in a secluded area of the Alturas Rancheria Reservation, about 3 hours north. Normally, we only talked at Christmas, short exchanges of words between long, awkward silences. But now I needed to hear a familiar voice, someone who knew me before all this mess. She answered on the fourth ring. "Marcus." Her voice was raspy, as if she had just woken up, even though it was almost 10 in the morning. "Is that you?" "Yes, Grandma. It's me." A long silence. Then, "You don't sound like you." "What do you mean?" "Your voice is different. Empty." I laughed, but it sounded forced even to me. "I'm just tired. It's been a rough week." "No." Her voice became sharper. "That's more than tiredness, Marcus. I can hear it. There's something wrong with you." The certainty in her words made me pause. My grandmother always had what my mother used to call the gift. A sensitivity to things most people didn't notice. When I was a kid, she told me stories about the spirits in the hills, about how certain people could see beyond the veil. I always thought they were just stories. "Grandma, My voice caught. Suddenly, everything that had happened in the last few weeks crashed down on me all at once. The weight, the confusion, the fear. "I need help." "Come here," she said immediately. "Now. Today." "I don't know if—" "Marcus." Her voice was firm, leaving no room for discussion. "Whatever is on you won't go away by itself. You need a cleansing. Come home." 3 hours later, I was driving north on Highway 395, the Cascade Mountains rising on the horizon like jagged teeth biting the sky. The landscape gradually changed from golden hills to pine forest, the air cooling the further I got from the coast. The reservation was small, just a few hundred people scattered across a rural area where houses were miles apart. My grandmother's house was at the end of a dirt road that snaked through groves of juniper and sagebrush. It was a single-wide trailer she'd lived in for 30 years, surrounded by a chaotic garden of medicinal plants and a chicken coop that was probably older than me. She was waiting on the porch when I arrived, a small, solid figure wearing a faded flannel shirt and jeans. Her hair, formerly black, now mostly gray, was braided into a single plait that hung over her shoulder. When I got out of the car, she didn't hug me. She just stood there, looking at me with those dark, penetrating eyes that always seemed to see so much more than they should. "Worse than I thought," she said finally. "What?" "Come inside. We need to talk." The inside of the trailer was warm and smelled of sage tobacco and something else, cedar perhaps. The walls were covered with old photographs in faded frames, pictures of family members I barely recognized. She directed me to sit at the small kitchen table and placed a mug of tea in front of me without asking if I wanted it. "Drink," she commanded. The tea was bitter, with an earthy taste that made my stomach churn. But I drank it. She sat across from me, her hands, twisted with arthritis but still strong, closed on the table. "Tell me everything." And I told her about the job, about Raul and Brenda, about the dinner and what happened after, about the strange symptoms, the dreams, the growing feeling that something was fundamentally wrong, about being fired, about my door ajar, about the video that disappeared from my phone. She listened without interrupting, her face revealing nothing. But when I finished, I saw something in her eyes that scared me. Recognition and worry. "You've been worked on," she said simply. "What does that mean?" "It means someone put something on you. Connection. A hook." She gestured vaguely toward my chest. "It's not just natural obsession or attraction. It's something done with purpose, with intent." "You mean like witchcraft?" The word sounded ridiculous coming out of my mouth, like something from a bad movie. But my grandmother didn't laugh. "Call it what you want. It has many names. What matters is that someone tied something to you, and if it's not cut, it will keep pulling until there's nothing left." "But that's—" I stopped. I wanted to say impossible, but nothing about the last few weeks felt possible. How would someone even do something like that? "There are many ways. Personal objects are the most common. Hair, nails, blood, sweat, saliva, clothes you've worn, photos, anything that carries your essence." She tilted her head. "Did she ever touch you? Kiss you? Have you in any way?" "No. I mean, she tried, but And then I remembered. The dinner. The way she had hugged me when I arrived. Her body pressed against mine. Her arms around my neck. How long did it last? 10 seconds? 15? Long enough to... She got what she needed in that hug, my grandmother said, reading my face. "Probably your sweat, maybe a few strands of hair. That's all she needed." I felt sick. "And now," Now we cut it. She stood up, her knees cracking with the movement. But it won't be easy and it will hurt. Are you ready? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. My grandmother led me to a small structure behind the trailer, halfway between a shed and a cabin, with weathered wood walls and a corrugated metal roof. She kept it locked, and it took her a moment to find the right key on her keyring. Inside, it was dark and cold, even with the July heat outside. The floor was packed earth. The air smelled of dirt and something medicinal. A single window covered with heavy fabric let in only the faintest light. In the center of the room was an old wooden chair. Around it, a circle had already been drawn on the dirt floor, but not with chalk or paint. This was something darker, more permanent. Salt mixed with ash, perhaps. Take off your shirt, my grandmother said, and your shoes. Sit in the middle of the circle. I obeyed, my fingers clumsy with my clothes. The cold air raised goosebumps on my arms. I sat in the chair, my bare feet on the cold dirt. She lit candles, 3 of them, positioned at equidistant points around the circle. Not normal candles. These were thick and made of dark wax, and they smelled of something that wasn't wax. Animal fat, maybe. Then she started walking around me, carrying a branch of something I didn't recognize. Not sage, not cedar, something spikier. She passed it over my head, my shoulders, my back, murmuring words I didn't understand. Some seemed to be in Pit River, the language she rarely spoke. Others were something older, rougher. The temperature dropped even further. My breath came out in small clouds of vapor. There's something tied to you, she said, still walking, still murmuring. I can see it. It enters at the base of your skull, runs down your spine, wraps around your heart. It's like a root that's grown through you. I could feel it. God help me, I could feel it. Like something foreign and cold inside my own body. Something that shouldn't be there. She stopped in front of me, put the branch aside, and picked up a small knife. Nothing ornamental, just an old hunting knife with a worn wooden handle. For one terrifying moment, I thought she was going to cut me. But instead, she cut her own palm, letting the blood drip into a small ceramic bowl. This is not for you, she said, seeing my expression. It's for them, the guardians. They need payment for the work they're going to do. She mixed something else into the bowl, dried herbs, maybe, or ash. Then she dipped her fingers into it and began to mark my face, my chest, my arms with lines and symbols I didn't recognize. The mixture burned where it touched my skin. Not physical burning, but something deeper, as if it were drawing heat from within my bones. Don't move, she said, and don't speak. Whatever happens next, don't leave the circle until I tell you to. What's going to? Don't speak. I shut my mouth. She started walking again, but this time her chanting got louder, more urgent. The candles flickered, although there was no wind. The shadows on the walls seemed to move independently of the flames, twisting into shapes that almost seemed to have faces. And then I felt it, something pulling out of me. Not physically. There were no hands on me, nothing I could see. But it was as if something invisible had grabbed that cold root inside my chest and started tearing it out. The pain was excruciating, like being turned inside out starting from the center. I screamed, my body arching involuntarily, but my feet remained planted on the ground. I couldn't move anything below the waist. Hold on, my grandmother yelled. It's coming out. Let it out. I could feel it moving inside me, something alive and resistant, something that didn't want to be expelled. It gripped, coiled tighter, sought deeper places to hide. And then, for just a moment, I saw her, not physically present in the room, but projected somehow. Brenda, standing at the edge of the circle, looking at me with those cold, calculating eyes. But her face was different, harder, older, as if the mask of youth and beauty had slipped enough to reveal something ancient and hungry underneath. She reached out toward me, and I could see threads coming out of her fingers. Red, glowing threads, like exposed tendons connecting to my chest, my neck, my temple. My grandmother saw it too. She yelled something, not in English, not in Pit River, but in something more primitive, and swung the thorny branch through those threads. They snapped, not silently. They broke with a sound I felt in my teeth, like shattering glass mixed with the shriek of something animal. Brenda's apparition wavered, her mouth opening in a silent scream, and then disappeared like smoke dissipating. I slumped back into the chair, every muscle in my body trembling uncontrollably. Sweat dripped from my face despite the cold. I couldn't get my lungs to work properly, short, quick breaths that didn't give me enough air. My grandmother was beside me immediately, a hand on my shoulder. "Breathe, slowly. You're okay. It's over." But it didn't feel over. It felt like something had been torn out of me, leaving ragged holes behind. "The knot is broken," she said softly, "but the wound is open. She can still try to get back in, especially in the next few days. You have to be strong, Marcus. You have to resist any urge to seek her out, to think about her, to want explanations. If you give her even an inch, she'll remake the connection. And next time, it will be stronger." I nodded weakly, unable to form words. She helped me dress, then led me back to the main trailer. She made me lie down on her bed, the only bed in the place, and covered me with a heavy wool blanket that smelled of cedar and tobacco. "Rest," she said. "You lost a lot. Your body needs to heal." I slept for 14 hours straight, and for the first time in weeks, I dreamed of nothing. When I woke up, it was noon the next day. Sunlight streamed through the small window above the bed, warming my face. I could hear my grandmother outside, the low murmur of her voice talking to the chickens, the squeak of the manual water pump. I sat up slowly. My body still ached, that deep, bone-weary pain that comes after exhaustive physical labor. But something else had shifted. That feeling of heaviness, of being watched, of having something foreign coiled inside me. It was gone. I could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. I found my grandmother in the garden, pulling weeds between rows of plants I couldn't name. She looked up as I approached, studying my face. "Better," she said, "but not healed. Not yet." She stood up, wiping the dirt from her hands, and went into the trailer. She returned a moment later with a small pouch made of soft leather, tied with gut string. It was the size of my thumb, heavy for its size. "Wear this," she said, placing it around my neck. "Inside your shirt. Don't take it off. Don't show it to anyone. Don't let anyone touch it. What's inside? Protection. That's all you need to know." She held my shoulders, forcing me to look into her eyes. "Listen closely, Marcus. What I did yesterday weakened the bond, but it didn't completely destroy it. These things, they don't die easy. She'll feel that something broke, and she may try to repair it. How? In any way she can. Maybe she'll try to find you in person. Maybe she'll work through the dreams again. Maybe she'll send someone else. I don't know. What I do know is this. If you see her, even from a distance, even by accident, you turn and walk away. You don't speak to her. You don't look at her. You don't let your mind dwell on her for a second. What if she won't let me leave? Then you scream. You fight. You do whatever you have to. But you don't give in." Her nails pressed into my skin through the shirt. "Do you understand? Even if a part of you wants to give in and a part will want to, you resist. Because if you give in now, after everything we've done, the bond will reform twice as strong. And next time, neither I nor anyone else will be able to set you free." I stayed with my grandmother for a week. She made me drink more of that bitter tea every morning and every night. She taught me prayers I had to recite before sleeping. Not Christian prayers, but older things in a language I had to learn phonetically because I couldn't understand the words. She made me go with her to gather herbs in the hills, long hikes through sagebrush and juniper under the scorching sun. She talked as we walked, telling stories her own grandmother had told her about spirits that took human forms, about sorcerers who could place hooks in people's souls, about the importance of keeping your own will strong and clear. "People think this kind of work is about magic," she said one day, leaning down to snip a branch of something with small white flowers. "But it's not. It's about will. All that woman did was find a weakness in you, a place where you were already uncertain, already vulnerable, and thrust something through that opening. If your will was whole, none of it would have stuck. So you're saying it's my fault? No, I'm saying everyone has weaknesses. Everyone has places where they're open. The trick is to know where your open places are and guard them. She placed the branch in her pouch. You were lonely, isolated, living in a city where you knew no one, doing work that didn't fulfill you. You were hungry for connection, even if you didn't know it. She sensed that and used it against you. The words hurt because they were true. I had been lonely. I was hungry for something, not sex necessarily, but to be seen, to matter to someone. And Brenda had offered that, even if it was a poisoned, twisted version. So what do I do now? I asked. You rebuild. You find things that make you strong. People who remind you who you are. Work that has meaning. Routines that anchor you. She looked at me. And you never, ever go back to the place where she is. By the end of that week, I felt more like myself than I had in months. Sleep came easier. The nightmares had stopped completely. Even my appetite had returned. For the first time since this whole mess began, food tasted like something real instead of just fuel. But I also knew I couldn't stay on the reservation forever. I needed to find work, rebuild my life, move forward. My grandmother understood. On the morning I decided to leave, she made me sit down at the kitchen table one last time. There's one more thing, she said. She placed a small glass jar on the table filled with a dark gray powder that smelled of earth and something burned. When you get wherever you're going to stay, you put this on all the entrances. Doors, windows, any place where something can get in. It's a barrier. It's not perfect, but it will help keep unwanted things out. I took the jar, feeling its weight in my palm. Thank you, Grandma, for everything.
Please.
She waved her hand, dismissing my gratitude. Your family, it's what we do. Then her face grew serious again. But Marcus, listen. If she shows up, not if, when she does, you don't hesitate. You don't try to be polite or rational. You simply leave. Promise me. I promise. I drove back to San Luis Obispo that afternoon, but not to my old apartment. That place was contaminated now, filled with bad memories and the lingering feeling of invasion. Instead, I rented a room in a shared house on the other side of town, near the university. It was cheap, had roommates I rarely saw, and most importantly, it was miles away from anywhere Brenda might frequent. On my first night there, I spread my grandmother's gray powder at every entrance, exactly as she had instructed. My new roommates would probably have thought I was crazy if they had seen me, but I waited until everyone was asleep. I worked by candlelight, murmuring those phonetic prayers my grandmother taught me, even though I wasn't sure if I was doing it right. When I finished, the air in the room felt different, cleaner, more mine. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding my life from scratch. I found work at a small auto repair shop on the north edge of town. A small, family-run place managed by a Vietnamese veteran named Hank who didn't ask many questions as long as you did your job. It was honest work, fixing engines, changing tires, diagnosing electrical problems. My body already knew the rhythm, the pleasant strain of working muscles, the smell of grease and gasoline, the satisfaction of taking something broken and fixing it. Hank was a good boss, quiet most of the time but fair. He paid me in cash at the end of each week and never complained if I needed to leave early or come in late. The shop had a steady pace, never too busy, never too slow, and the other mechanics left me alone, which I appreciated. Slowly, I started sleeping better. The nightmares didn't return. That feeling of being watched, of having something foreign coiled inside me, remained absent. I started to believe that maybe it really was over. It was just as my guard started to drop that I saw her. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about 6 weeks after the ritual at my grandmother's house. I had finished my shift early and decided to grab some groceries before heading home. There was a small supermarket a few blocks from the shop, and I was walking across the parking lot when something made me stop. I didn't see her immediately. It was more of a feeling, that old instinct of prey sensing it's being hunted. The air changed. My skin tingled. The small pouch under my shirt suddenly felt hot against my chest. I turned my head slowly. She was across the parking lot, standing beside a flower stand that a street vendor had set up. But she wasn't looking at the flowers. She was looking directly at me. Even at a distance, I could see that something was different about her. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun instead of those loose waves she used to wear. She was wearing dark sunglasses that hid half her face. Her clothes were more conservative: pants, a button-down blouse, nothing like the tight, revealing ensembles that were her trademark. But it was her. I'd know that posture anywhere, the way she held her shoulders, the angle of her chin. We stood like that for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't make any movement toward me. She just stared. And then, deliberately, she took off the dark glasses. Her eyes met mine across the distance between us. There was something in that gaze that froze me in place. Not desire, not anger, but something colder, more calculated, like a chess player studying the board before making their move. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. If you see her, even from a distance, even by accident, you turn and walk away. I forced my legs to move. I turned, walked back toward my car, forcing myself not to run even though every instinct screamed to do so. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys trying to unlock the door. When I finally managed to get in, I locked the doors immediately and checked the rearview mirror. She was still there, exactly where I had left her. But now she was smiling. Not that artificial, bright smile from the office. This was different. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed something they suspected. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I checked the rearview mirror obsessively, expecting to see her car following me. But no one was there. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, listening to every creak of the house, every car that passed outside, certain that somehow she had found out where I lived. My grandmother's pouch felt warm against my skin, and I caught myself touching it repeatedly, checking that it was still there. In the following days, I kept seeing her, or thinking I was, a flash of dark hair in the crowd. Someone with her height and build walking into a store just as I was leaving. A car similar to hers parked at the end of my street. I started varying my routine again, different routes to work, random shopping times. I avoided any place I knew she might frequent, any area of the city where she might have reason to be. But San Luis Obispo wasn't that big. Eventually, our paths would cross again. Took 2 weeks. I was at the laundromat, one of those 24-hour places with rows of machines and flickering fluorescent lights, at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. I purposely chose an odd time, hoping to avoid crowds and any chance of running into someone I knew. The place was empty except for a college student sleeping in a plastic chair while his clothes spun and an older woman folding sheets at a table in the back. I had just transferred my clothes from the washer to the dryer when the front door chime rang. I didn't look up immediately. I just kept feeding quarters into the machine, focused on my task. Then I smelled that perfume, jasmine and musk. My entire body froze. Marcus, her voice, softer than I remembered, almost gentle, as if we were just old friends running into each other by chance. I forced myself to turn around slowly. She was standing about 10 feet away, holding a laundry basket against her hip. She was wearing workout clothes, leggings, and a tank top, and her hair was in a messy ponytail. She looked tired, normal, like she was just another person trying to do laundry late at night. "Don't talk to me," I said, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. "I just want to talk." She took a step forward. "Please, Marcus. 5 minutes." "No. You won't even hear me out? After everything we went through together." "We didn't go through anything together. You—" I stopped, realizing the college student had woken up and was watching us with lazy interest. The last thing I needed was a scene. "I have to go." I turned to grab my still damp clothes from the dryer. "I know what your grandmother did," Brenda said softly behind me. I froze, my hand on the dryer door. I felt it when the knot broke. It hurt. "Did you know that?" Her voice had a strange quality now, not angry, but something more dangerous. Hurt, like having something ripped out of me. "You had no right to do that. We had something special." "We had nothing." I pulled my clothes out, not caring that they were still wet. I shoved them into my basket. "You're lying to yourself." She was closer now. I could hear her breathing. You felt it. I know you did. That connection between us wasn't just me. You wanted it too. You made me lose my job. I saved you from that shitty job. You were better than that. You broke into my apartment. I needed something of yours. For the work. You left me no choice when you ran away. She was right behind me now. I could feel the heat of her body. But it doesn't matter now. We can start over. Clean slate. No Raoul, no job, no any of that. Just you and me. The small pouch under my shirt was burning now, so hot it was almost painful. It was a warning, a protection activating. It's never going to happen, I said, grabbing my basket and turning toward the door. Her hand grabbed my arm. Her touch was like an electric current. Not figuratively, I mean literally, like sticking my finger in a socket. Every muscle in my body seized up. The basket fell from my hands, clothes scattering on the dusty floor. And for a moment, just a split second, I saw what she really was beneath the mask. She wasn't human. Or maybe she was human once, but had become something else through years of doing the kind of work my grandmother had described. Her face stretched, her eyes too deep, her mouth too wide, filled with teeth that were just a little too sharp. Her skin wasn't skin, but something more like damp paper stretched over muscle and bone. And behind her, around her, through her, threads. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Glowing red cords that stretched in all directions, disappearing through the walls, out the window, down through the floor. Each one leading to another person, another victim, another soul she had thrust her hooks into. And coming from me, only a single thread now, thin and fragile but still there, connecting my chest to hers. Then the vision vanished and she was just Brenda again. Beautiful, normal, but her smile had changed. It was triumphant. You saw, she whispered. You finally saw, and now you understand. You can't run from me, Marcus. We're linked. We always were. We always will be. The small pouch was so hot now I was sure it was blistering my skin. But with that heat came clarity, strength. Let go of me, I said, my voice steady. No, let go. Something in my tone must have surprised her because her hand slackened. Just for a second, but it was enough. I pulled my arm free and this time I ran. I left my clothes, I left my basket, I left everything except my keys and my wallet. I burst out the door, across the parking lot, toward my car. Behind me, I heard laughter. Not the artificial, loud laughter from before, but something deeper, more real. The sound of someone who knew they had scored a point. I drove straight to the reservation. It was almost 11 at night when I left the laundromat, which meant I wouldn't get to my grandmother's house until after 2 in the morning. I didn't care. I drove with the pedal to the floor, speeding, praying not to get pulled over by the police. My grandmother was awake when I arrived, as if she had been expecting me. She was sitting on the porch, an old rifle in her lap, looking out at the dirt road. She touched you, she said as soon as I got out of the car. It wasn't a question. How do you? I can see it. The bond is darker now. She pointed to my chest. Get inside. Once again, I found myself in the small cabin behind the trailer, sitting in that same wooden chair, surrounded by candles and symbols traced in the dirt. But this time it was worse. This time, when my grandmother started her chanting, the pain was immediate and intense. Something inside me fought. It wasn't just the connection. It was part of me now, rooted so deeply that tearing it out felt like tearing out my very substance. I screamed. I tried to get out of the circle, but my legs wouldn't work. Hold on, my grandmother yelled, but her voice seemed to come from far away. Almost there. Don't let it in. But it was too late. It had already gotten in. In that moment of contact in the laundromat, when Brenda's hand had grabbed my arm, she had renewed the bond. And this time it was stronger, deeper. It had rooted beyond where my grandmother could reach. The ritual lasted for hours. When it finally ended, I was lying on the dirt floor, shaking and soaked in sweat. My grandmother was kneeling beside me, her face gray with exhaustion. I couldn't get it all, she said softly. It's too deep now. All I can do is weaken it, keep it dormant. What does that mean? It means you'll carry a piece of her forever. But as long as you're strong, as long as you don't give her entry, it will just be a scar. Something you feel sometimes, but that doesn't control you. And what if I give her entry? My grandmother didn't answer, but the way she looked away told me everything I needed to know. I stayed on the reservation for almost a month after that. Not because I was healing, but because I was too afraid to leave. Afraid that if I went back to the city, I would end up seeking her out. That bond, even weakened, would pull me back eventually. My grandmother understood. She put me to work, hard, physical chores that kept my body busy and my mind too tired to wander. I mended fences, cleaned the chicken coop, chopped firewood for the coming winter. At night, she made me sit with her while she worked on her medicines, teaching me the names of plants I should know, stories I should remember. You have to build something, she kept saying. Not just stay away from her. That's not enough. You have to build a life that is so strong, so complete, that there is no place for her to enter. How do I do that? You find your purpose. You find your people. You remember who you are when no one is trying to tell you what to be. Slowly, I started to understand what she meant. For so long, years, maybe my whole life, I had lived reactively. I took whatever job came along. I lived wherever was convenient. I moved through life as if it were just something that happened to me instead of something I actively created. And when someone like Brenda showed up, someone with a strong will and clear intention, it was easy for her to simply fill that void, because there was nothing there to resist her. So what do? I asked one night as we sat on the porch, watching the stars spread across the sky like broken glass. You decide, she said simply. What do you want? Not what anyone else wants from you. Not what you think you should want. What do you really want? I thought about it for a long time and realized I didn't know. I had never allowed myself to want anything. But slowly, in the days and weeks that followed, I started to find out. I wanted work that meant something. I wanted connections with people who saw me as I really was. I wanted to wake up in the morning and feel something besides just boredom or fear. I realized, to feel like my life belonged to me. Eventually, I knew I had to leave the reservation. I couldn't hide forever. But this time, it would be different. This time, I was leaving with purpose. I didn't go back to San Luis Obispo. That city was contaminated for me now, filled with bad memories and the persistent presence of Brenda. Instead, I drove north past the reservation into Oregon. I stopped in a small town called Klamath Falls. Not too big, not too small, the kind of place where you could disappear without isolating yourself completely. I found work at another auto shop. I rented a small trailer on the outskirts of town. I performed the ritual my grandmother taught me, spreading that protective powder, establishing barriers, creating a space that was undeniably mine. And I started building. It was slow at first. I started small. I woke up at the same time every day. I ate my meals. I kept my space clean. Simple routines that anchored me, that reminded me I had control over my own life. Then I started branching out. I made friends with one of the other mechanics, a guy named Tom who invited me to play basketball on Wednesdays with some buddies. I started frequenting a local diner for breakfast on Sundays, always sitting at the same booth, until the waitress started having my order ready before I even asked. Small things, normal things, but each one was an anchor point, a thread connecting me to this life, to this place, to this version of myself. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, I started to feel like a real person again. The dreams of Brenda didn't stop completely, but they changed. Instead of controlling me, of dragging me into situations I couldn't escape, now they were just dreams. Disturbing, yes, uncomfortable, but no more real than any other nightmare. And in some of them, I started fighting back. Months passed. Summer turned into autumn, then winter. Snow covered the mountains around Klamath Falls, and I learned to drive on ice. I spent Christmas with my grandmother, driving back to the reservation with gifts I had carefully chosen. Herbs I knew she liked, a thick wool blanket, good tobacco of the kind she preferred. She looked at me differently now, with approval, pride even. "You're holding steady," she said as she prepared the tea. "I can see it." The bond is still there, but it's thin, dry, like an old scar. I still think about her sometimes, I admitted. Not in a good way, just, I wonder where she is, what she's doing. That's normal. But as long as you're only curious instead of longing, you're fine. She slid a cup across the table to me. She's probably moved on. People like her don't stay where they failed. It bruises their ego. She'll have found someone else. Another target. The idea made me feel sick, not from jealousy, but from guilt. Someone out there was going through what I went through. Maybe worse because they didn't have a grandmother who knew how to cut bonds. They didn't have anyone to warn them about the danger until it was too late. There's nothing you can do, my grandmother said, reading my face. You can't save everyone from her. All you can do is save yourself. She was right, of course, but that didn't make it easier. Spring arrived, and with it a kind of peace I hadn't expected. I had been in Klamath Falls for almost 8 months, and it was starting to feel like home. I knew the names of the regular customers at the shop. I had my favorite table at the diner. I had even adopted a dog, a stray named Boone that someone had abandoned in the shop's parking lot and who decided he was mine. Life was good. Simple but good. And then one Saturday morning in late May, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but a California area code. My stomach clenched. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. The same number. On the third time, I answered. Hello. Silence on the other end. But not empty silence. I could hear someone breathing. Who is this? I demanded. Marcus. The voice was male, familiar. It's Raul. Of all the people I expected, he wasn't on the list. How did you get this number? It doesn't matter. Listen, man, I need to warn you about something. About what? A long pause. Then about Brenda. She hasn't been well, Marcus. Hasn't been well since you left. She's obsessed. Talking about you all the time. Looking for you online. Calling places trying to track you down. My blood ran cold. Why are you telling me this? Because I got rid of her, man. Finally. Filed for divorce. But before I left, she said something that scared me. Said she would find you. That it didn't matter how long it took. That it didn't matter where you ran. She would find you. He breathed shakily. She has problems, Marcus. Serious mental problems. I don't know what she did to you, but I saw things in her house. Rituals. Altars. Really crazy shit. And I saw how she gets when she talks about you. It's not normal. Where is she now? I don't know. She moved out a few months ago. No one knows where. But I heard from a friend of hers that she was planning to go north. Oregon or Washington, maybe. He stopped. I just thought you should know. Be careful, man. Lock your doors. And if you see her, run. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. Boone nudged my leg, sensing my stress, and I automatically started stroking his head. She was coming. Not maybe, not someday. She was coming. Part of me wanted to immediately pack my bags and move again. Drive to the other side of the country, change my name, disappear completely. But another part, the part that had grown over the last few months, the part that had rebuilt a life here, refused. No, I wasn't going to run again. I wasn't going to let her take away what I had built. But I wasn't going to be stupid either. I bought a security alarm for the trailer. Installed new, better locks. I started varying my routine again, taking different routes to work, shopping at random times. And I waited. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. I started to relax, convincing myself that maybe Raul had misinterpreted. Maybe Brenda had just been speaking out of anger and frustration, without really intending to follow through. Then, one night in late June, Boone started barking. It wasn't his normal, someone's at the door, or there's a squirrel out there bark. It was something more primal, more frantic. A warning bark, a fear bark. I sat up in bed, my heart instantly racing. The alarm hadn't gone off, which meant no one had actually entered. But Boone kept barking, staring intently at the front window. I grabbed the flashlight I kept next to the bed and moved cautiously toward the window. The curtains were closed, but there was a small gap where they didn't meet completely. I peered out. There, standing on the gravel road about 50 feet from the trailer, was a figure. I couldn't see her face. It was too dark, and she was just out of range of the porch light. But I recognized the silhouette, the posture, the way she stood with her weight on one hip. Brenda. She didn't move. She didn't wave. She didn't try to approach. She just stood there, watching my trailer as if memorizing every detail. My hand found the small pouch under my t-shirt, squeezing until my knuckles were white. The protection was still there. It was still working. She couldn't get in. Not physically, at least. I stood there, barely breathing, watching her watch me. How much time passed? 5 minutes? 10? Felt like an eternity. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, she turned and walked away down the road, disappearing into the darkness. Boone stopped barking, but remained tense, looking where she had been. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, the kitchen knife in my lap and Boone pressed against my side, until the sun rose. The next morning, I called my grandmother. "She found me," I said without preamble when she answered. "I know." Her voice was tired. "I felt something shift last night. The bond pulled." "What do I do?" "What you've been doing. You stay strong. You don't give her entry. You don't let the fear control you." Pause. "But, Marcus, maybe it's time to confront her." "Confront her? You told me to stay away from her. I told you not to give her entry. That's different. As long as you're running, she has power over you. But if you stand your ground in your space protected by the work we did, you might be able to break this once and for all." "How?" "You say no. Not with anger, not with fear, but with absolute certainty. You tell her she has no power over you, that the bond is broken, that she is no longer welcome in your life." My grandmother took a deep breath. "It won't be easy. She'll fight. She'll try to seduce you, to scare you, to manipulate you. But if you stand firm, if you remember who you are and what you've built, you can cut her out completely." "And what if I can't?" "Then you keep running forever. And eventually, she catches you when you're weak." I hung up the phone and stood looking out the window, watching the sun rise over the distant mountains. Boone placed his head on my lap, his brown eyes looking up at me with that simple trust only dogs have. I had built something here, a life, a routine, a sense of myself that was mine, not shaped by someone else's expectations or the hooks of someone trying to control me. And I wasn't going to let her take that away from me. For the next few days, I prepared myself. I reinforced the protections in the trailer, spreading more of that gray powder my grandmother gave me. I recited those phonetic prayers every morning and every night. I kept the small pouch always against my chest, constantly reminding myself of the shield I carried. But mostly, I prepared my mind. I practiced what I would say, how I would stand. I imagined every possible scenario, her trying to seduce, her trying to threaten, her feigning vulnerability or anger. And for each one, I created an answer that came from a place of strength, not of fear. Brenda showed up again 3 nights later. This time it was earlier, around 9 in the evening, with the twilight still staining the sky purple and gold. I was sitting on the small porch of the trailer with a beer, Boone at my feet, when I saw her car coming up the gravel road. It was a different sedan than the one she drove in San Luis Obispo, but I knew it was her before it even stopped. She got out slowly, closing the door with a soft click. She was wearing jeans and a simple blouse, nothing provocative, nothing flashy. Her hair was down, no heavy makeup. She looked smaller somehow, more human. But I remembered what I had seen in that laundromat. I knew what was under the mask. "Marcus," she said, stopping at the bottom of my steps. She didn't even try to come up. "Please, I just want to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. 5 minutes. That's all I ask." Her voice was trembling. "Please." Part of me, that old, wounded part that still remembered what it was like to be lonely, wanted to give in, wanted to listen, wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, there could be redemption or closure or something besides this infinite conflict. But then I felt the small pouch burn against my chest. A warning. "All right," I said finally. "5 minutes. But you stay there. You don't come up here. You don't get any closer." Something crossed her face. Frustration, perhaps, but she nodded. "All right." She crossed her arms, looking down at the ground. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, "I'm sorry." The words were so unexpected that they almost made me laugh. "You're sorry. I know you don't believe me. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get so out of control." She looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. Real or fabricated, I couldn't tell. I felt something when I was around you, something I hadn't felt in years. And I panicked when you tried to leave. I did things, terrible things. You made me lose my job. You broke into my apartment. You put some kind of spell on me that made me sick for weeks. I know, and I'm sorry. I stopped all that. I swear I stopped. She took a step forward. Boone growled softly. "I just want to make you understand. I'm not a monster. I'm just broken. And you made me feel less broken. That's not my responsibility to fix you. I know. You're right. I'm just asking for forgiveness, closure, a chance to move on without this ugly thing between us." She sounded sincere. She sounded like she meant it. And maybe part of her did mean it. Maybe she really believed what she was saying. But I remembered what my grandmother told me. People like Brenda didn't just do work on others. They did work on themselves too, molding their own minds, their own memories, until they believed their own lies. "I accept your apology," I said carefully. "And if you truly want to move on, then this is what we do. You leave. You stop looking for me. You stop showing up where I am. And we never speak again." Her face twisted. "Marcus, it's that or nothing, Brenda. But I drove so far. I left everything behind. Raul, the job, San Luis, everything. For you. I never asked you to do that. You didn't have to ask." Her voice got louder now, the vulnerability cracking to reveal something sharper underneath. "You felt it. I know you felt it. That connection between us wasn't just in my head. It was," I said calmly. "It was in your head, and it was from the work you did. But it wasn't real. It never was real. You're lying." "I'm not." I stood up, standing tall, letting my shadow fall over her on the stairs. Boone stood beside me, rigid and protective. "And deep down, you know that. You know what you did was wrong. You know it's not love. It's control, possession. And it's not going to work on me. It's never going to work on me." For a moment, I saw that thing again, that flash of what she really was. Her eyes darkened. Her smile widened until it was wrong. The threads around her rippled like hair underwater. "You can't reject me," she said, and her voice was different now, deeper, layered. "I put too much of myself into you. You owe me. I owe you nothing. I made you." The mask fell completely now. She wasn't crying anymore. She was furious, shaking with rage. "You were nothing when I met you. Just a sad grunt worker with no friends, no future, no purpose. I gave you attention. I made you feel special. And this is how you repay me." "You're right," I said, my voice still calm. "I didn't have much when we met, but I was mine. And now I'm mine again. And you have no place here anymore." I pointed to the road. "Go home, Brenda. Now." She looked at me for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with heavy breath. I saw her fists clench, saw the muscles in her jaw work. She was calculating, looking for an opening, a weakness, anything she could use. But I had closed myself off. The protections were in place. My will was firm. And finally, she realized she had lost. "You'll regret this," she said softly. "One day, when you're alone again, when that perfect life you built falls apart, you'll remember me. And you'll wish you had accepted what I offered." "Maybe," I said, "but it won't be today." She stood there for another moment, then spat on the ground at my feet. Not literally, there was no actual saliva, but the gesture was clear. Then she turned and walked back to her car. She got in without looking back, started the engine, and drove away down the gravel road, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. I stood on the porch, watching until the taillights completely disappeared into the darkness. Boone pressed against my leg, and I crouched down to wrap my arms around him, burying my face in his fur. My entire body was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of will it had taken to stand my ground. And then I felt it. Something inside me released, like a knot that had been tight for so long I had forgotten it was there, suddenly unraveling. The small pouch against my chest grew warm for a moment. Not painfully, but pleasantly, as if it were doing its final work. The last thread had snapped. I took a deep breath, deeper than I had been able to in almost a year, and for the first time since I met Brenda, I felt completely free. That was 2 years ago. Brenda never came back. I received no more calls, saw no more of her car, felt no more of that persistent presence at the edge of my consciousness. Raul called me one more time, a few months after that final confrontation, to tell me that Brenda had moved to Washington State and that he had heard rumors she had gotten involved with some guy in Seattle. I felt sorry for him, whoever he was, but there was nothing I could do. My grandmother says that sometimes that's the hardest part of surviving something like this. Knowing that the predator simply moves on to the next prey, and you can't warn everyone. All you can do, she told me the last time I visited her, is live your life so completely, so well, that it becomes a kind of testimony to yourself if to no one else. So that's what I do. I still live in Klamath Falls. I still work at the auto shop, though I'm the manager now. I still have breakfast on Sundays at the same diner, and the waitress, Linda, her name is Linda, now sits with me sometimes during her break and we talk about our weeks. I started going to a local hiking group, met some people who became real friends. Not the kind of superficial acquaintances I used to have, but people who genuinely care, who show up when they say they will. I still wear the small pouch my grandmother gave me, though it's getting worn now. She said one day I won't need it anymore, that the work we do within ourselves eventually becomes its own protection. But I'm not ready to let go of it yet, because here's the thing about this kind of trauma, this kind of violation. It leaves scars, not visible ones, not the kind you can point to and say, look, here's where I was hurt, but they are there. In the ways I still double-check the locks before sleeping. In the way I still have an instinctive reaction when I see someone who looks like her from a distance. In the way I still, sometimes, wake up at 3 in the morning with my heart pounding, convinced there's someone standing outside my window. But those scars don't define me. They are part of my story, but they are not the whole story. The whole story is this. I was lost, and someone tried to possess me when I was vulnerable. And for a while, it almost worked. But I fought back. I found help. I did the work. The hard, painful, scary work of cutting bonds that had grown through me like invasive roots. And I survived. More than survived. I thrived. Because here's what Brenda never understood, what people like her never understand. You can't truly possess another person. You can scare them, manipulate them, even control them for a while. But in the end, every person has a core of themselves that cannot be taken, only given away. And if you refuse to give it away, if you keep holding on to that core no matter what, eventually you can break free. It won't be easy. It will hurt. You may need help from people like my grandmother who know old and true things about how will works, about how to protect your own soul. You may need to rebuild your life from scratch, in a new place with new people as a new version of yourself. But it is possible. I am living proof of that. Tonight, as I write this, I'm sitting on the same porch where I confronted Brenda for the last time. Boone is at my feet, older now, his muzzle graying. The sun is setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In a few hours, I'll be going to dinner with Linda. It's not a date yet. Not yet, but maybe it's becoming something. And for the first time in a long time, I'm letting it. Letting myself trust. Letting myself want. Letting the possibility of connection exist without panic. Because I've learned the difference now. Between someone who wants to control you and someone who wants to know you. Between a bond that strangles and one that supports. Between love and possession. And I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. More resilient. more capable of setting my own boundaries and defending them. I still wear the small pouch under my shirt, but now it's more of a reminder than a necessity. A physical symbol of something I built within myself, walls around the most vulnerable places, but with gates I can choose to open for the right people. Sometimes I still dream of her, of Brenda, but in those dreams, I'm no longer paralyzed, no longer helpless. In those dreams, I turn and walk away, and she can't follow me, because there are no more threads connecting us. No roots coiled through my chest, just scars where they were, scars that remind me of what I survived, what I learned, how far I've traveled since that day in the warehouse when I first saw her. My name is Marcus. I'm 34 years old, and I am mine, completely, undeniably, permanently mine. And no one, not Brenda, not anyone, is ever going to take that from me again. The light is fading now. Boone raises his head, sensing it's time to go inside. Inside, the lights are on, warm and welcoming. My home, my space, my life. I stand up, stretch, feel the pleasant satisfaction of muscles used in honest work. Tomorrow I'll go back to the shop. I'll fix engines. I'll laugh with Tom about last night's basketball game. I'll have my coffee where I always do, and I'll be exactly who I choose to be. No hooks, no threads, no strings attached, just me, free. And if you're reading this, if you're in a situation like I was, if you feel something pulling you in directions you didn't choose, if there's someone in your life who seems to have a kind of control over you that you can't explain, know this, you can break free. It won't be fast. It won't be easy. You may need help from people who understand things that most don't. You may need to cut ties, move, rebuild from scratch. But you can do it, because in the end, your will is yours. Your life is yours. Your soul is yours. And no one, no matter how powerful, how determined, how skilled, can take that from you unless you let them. So don't let them. Fight, resist. Build something so strong inside you that nothing from the outside can penetrate without your permission. And know that on the other side of that fight, there is a life waiting. A life that is truly yours, is worth fighting for. Promise.